Elon Musk has always been at the forefront of space innovation, but recent actions may test international law. His ambitions for Mars colonization have sparked a global conversation about space territory ownership and legal limits. At the heart of the issue is the Outer Space Treaty, which governs what nations and private entities can claim in space. Signed in 1967, the treaty states that no country can claim sovereignty over any celestial body, including planets. However, Musk's SpaceX has hinted at future Martian governance that could bypass Earth-based legal frameworks entirely. This suggestion raises legal eyebrows, as private companies are still bound by their home country's obligations under the treaty. Legal experts argue that proposing Martian self-rule could breach the treaty's non-appropriation principle. Although Musk hasn't officially claimed Mars, SpaceX's mission language implies more than just scientific exploration. Phrases like "making life multiplanetary" suggest permanent settlement, which may require its governance structure. If that governance structure rejects Earth's laws, it could become a point of international legal contention. NASA, a key partner in some endeavors, remains publicly cautious about supporting unilateral Martian policies. Even U.S. law, via the Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act, recognizes property rights for resources mined in space. But it stops short of allowing territory claims, reinforcing the Outer Space Treaty's guiding principles. The tension lies between Musk's futuristic vision and the legal frameworks built for 20th century space exploration. As SpaceX advances Starship missions, these legal questions are moving from theoretical to urgent. International legal scholars warn that SpaceX's actions could pressure governments to reinterpret space law. That reinterpretation might benefit SpaceX temporarily, but would trigger diplomatic disputes with spacefaring nations. China, Russia, and members of the European Space Agency have expressed concerns about U.S. private sector dominance. They fear that companies like SpaceX could act as de facto sovereigns in space without international consensus. The Moon Agreement, a supplementary treaty, tried to regulate resource rights, but it lacks major power ratification. The US, Russia, and China never signed it, rendering it ineffective in controlling current space races. Still, it reflects concerns about equitable space resource distribution, a concern Musk's Mars plans may reignite. Critics argue that if Musk sets a precedent for governance, other companies might bypass legal norms altogether. The potential for legal conflict escalates as other nations invest in their own lunar and Martian missions. For instance, China's lunar base plans and Russia's recent Mars mission talks mirror Musk's ambitious outlook. Some legal analysts suggest that an updated space treaty may be needed to reflect modern commercial spaceflight realities. If a private company influences policy changes, the global balance could tilt toward corporate-led space expansion. SpaceX's sheer capability, thanks to reusable rockets, makes it the most likely trigger for legal reform or conflict. As Starship aims to establish Mars cargo routes, ownership and jurisdiction questions become impossible to ignore. Global watchdogs fear a future where space is governed by whichever entity arrives first and stakes an informal claim. Musk's language has shifted from exploration to colonization, a legal red flag in the context of current treaties. Statements about Martian independence, if acted upon, could be seen as defiance of international law. No court currently exists with jurisdiction over Mars, which complicates any attempt to enforce Earth-bound legalities. That legal vacuum is both an opportunity and a threat, depending on your stance on space governance. Legal precedent could be set not by treaties, but by whatever company gets there first and stays the longest. If Elon Musk establishes permanent infrastructure on Mars, legal scholars believe lawsuits could follow swiftly. Lawsuits might not come from nations initially, but from international coalitions or watchdog organizations. Entities like the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space are watching developments closely. This committee advises on how international law should evolve with commercial space activities. Their stance will influence how courts interpret Musk's plans if legal challenges arise. US courts could also be forced to weigh in if SpaceX's Mars plans appear to violate treaty obligations. Even if Musk acts through SpaceX, US law still applies since SpaceX is a US-based company. The Federal Aviation Administration licenses launches, and those licenses come with compliance requirements. Violations could mean revoked licenses, investigations, or broader diplomatic consequences. For now, SpaceX operates in a legal gray area between visionary goals and unsettled international law. That gray area is shrinking as missions become more frequent and timelines for Mars colonization accelerate. Some argue Musk's provocation is intentional, meant to force legal reform that benefits commercial pioneers. He's previously leveraged regulatory delays to build public pressure and push for favorable policy shifts. If successful, this strategy could redefine who controls space and under what legal terms. Yet if it fails, SpaceX may face intense legal scrutiny and restrictions on its most ambitious projects. Observers compare the situation to maritime law's early days, when nations scrambled to control new sea routes. Eventually, the sea saw agreed-upon rules, but only after conflict, litigation, and geopolitical posturing. Space law may follow the same arc, especially if Musk's actions trigger diplomatic standoffs. Some fear that unilateral claims could lead to the militarization of space under the guise of protection. Though SpaceX is civilian, its contracts with the US military blur the lines of private and public interests. This entanglement makes its Mars plans even more sensitive from an international policy standpoint. Musk's statements about Martian independence have caught the attention of global policymakers and legal scholars alike. Whether he follows through or not, those words alone shape how governments respond to private space actors. Already, think tanks and space law journals are debating the potential consequences of SpaceX-led Martian governance. Public opinion also plays a role, with some lauding Musk as a visionary and others warning of space colonization dangers. Social media amplifies these voices, further polarizing global audiences about what Musk's real goals might be. Regardless of intent, SpaceX's pace forces conversations that governments hope to delay for decades. As legal systems scramble to catch up, any misstep could derail international cooperation in space exploration. International lawsuits could delay missions, block funding, or trigger sanctions, depending on legal interpretations. Legal ambiguity makes lawsuits more likely, especially if new Martian structures ignore international coordination. Even commercial rivals might use legal action to slow or disrupt SpaceX's progress toward planetary settlement. Elon Musk often embraces disruption, but in space law, disruption could mean litigation on an unprecedented scale. Government agencies may feel pressured to either rein in Musk or join his rapid expansion to avoid falling behind. That dynamic pushes legal, ethical, and policy debates far beyond what was envisioned when the Outer Space Treaty was signed. Many experts argue that the treaty was never meant to handle corporate space empires with their political ideologies. SpaceX's vertical integration from launch to payload to infrastructure puts it in a league with enormous legal implications. Even peaceful intentions, if poorly communicated, can be misinterpreted as land grabs or resource monopolization. Because of that, nations may push for a new multilateral agreement covering commercial space conduct and sovereignty claims. If Musk resists, lawsuits may become the main battleground for defining acceptable behavior beyond Earth's orbit. Private actors influencing planetary policy have never occurred before, making this a pivotal moment in space law history. Likely, Musk's legal team is already preparing for eventual lawsuits once Starship reaches Martian soil. They may argue that SpaceX is not claiming territory but merely establishing outposts for research and habitation. However, semantics may not protect them if actions appear to violate the treaty's core principles. Observers believe the first lawsuit will test whether modern interpretation can override outdated treaty language. That ruling would set the tone for every other company looking to follow SpaceX's lead to other planets. If the courts favor SpaceX, companies may gain unprecedented autonomy in space, prompting diplomatic fallout. If they rule against Musk, Mars colonization could be delayed by years as nations renegotiate legal terms. Meanwhile, Elon Musk continues to make public statements that blur the line between speculation and policy declaration. These comments are not lost on governments that worry about losing influence in shaping space's legal future. In the absence of clear guidelines, Musk's bold approach might act as a legal wedge, opening up new interpretations. Countries that feel threatened may counter with their own claims or fast-track missions to establish a presence. The result could be a chaotic space race, driven more by legal positioning than scientific discovery. Lawmakers are already exploring how to update US legislation to better align with Musk's trajectory. The challenge is balancing innovation with global stability, an equation not yet solved in modern space policy. Until then, every SpaceX launch is not just a technical achievement, but a legal test watched worldwide. The future of Mars colonization may hinge less on rocket science and more on treaty language and courtroom drama. And as SpaceX pushes boundaries, it may also be the one to finally redraw them, whether through innovation or litigation.